Yeah. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm John Connelly. I'm so thrilled that you could come online and to hear from God's Word, and hopefully my prayer is that you will be encouraged and strengthened. And my nose itches. It's allergy season, I guess, but it's so much fun knowing Jesus. It's such a cool experience to have a God who is like, I see a couple of those little red and blue circles. I guess we got it figured out, John and I and the family and the girls and the chickens. They had to work overtime to get this, me working on it. And so anyway, what I was saying was that it's such a wonderful, beautiful experience to know God who is like custom tailored, if you can take this the right way, custom tailored to you and your personality. He works with us as we are, and like for some of us, that's quite a challenge. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to wave at everybody here. I don't know. I'm really new at this live stuff, but I have some thoughts to share about finding yourself in God's time. Oh, hi. I see John, but you've covered up my face. Is that okay? I don't know how to fix that. Maybe I need to go up higher or something. Uh, what is the story here? I always knew I was kind of short, but John, I can't see anything but the top of my head. Can you bring your camera down? Bring your camera down. Down. More. In, let's see if I can sit on something. I'm sorry. I haven't. Maybe I should stand up or something. So we're still working out the details of it. Um, let me do this. I want to play a quick song. John, if you can hear me, move your move your phone way down, because there we go. Wow, thank you. It's not that I don't want to see you. Anyway, I'll sing a song, a real quick one. As the deer as the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. You, O Lord, are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. As the deer hungers for the water, So my soul hungers after thee. That's good. You, oh Lord, are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You, Lord, are my strength and shield. To you, O Lord, may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. I long to worship you. I long to worship you. I long to worship and adore you. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. I think I found something that I can sit on, so that John, you can come back. Sorry. The fella's just gotta do what he has to do. So John, you can probably turn your camera on if you want again. Finding yourself in God's time. Finding yourself in God's time. I have struggled, as many Christians, as far as wondering. I'm going to just be real today. Is that okay? Not that preachers shouldn't be real, but just kind of open my heart to you a little bit. I've struggled just like any other Christian, like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What's my function? Why in the heck am I here on the earth at this particular time? And struggles with knowing your purpose, knowing your function, knowing why you're here, what you're here for, what are you supposed to do? I mean, it's not like as if you planned your birth. Hello? You just pop and there you are. And then, sometimes when you go through a hard time, a hard place, I've gotten discouraged, and I thought, man, I wish I was somebody else. I wish I was someplace else, especially with this COVID stuff. I'm just waiting for be able to have a haircut. And times of discouragement that I just said, man, I don't want to be me. I don't know where I'm at, where I'm going. I don't know who I am. I was looking at this. I'm going to hold it up to you. This beautiful green and black stone is from Israel, and it is the national stone. I'm going to hold it up here. It's the national stone of Israel, and it's called the Elat stone. And it's a beautiful stone. But I can remember in seasons of my life when things were not the way I'd like them to be. And have you ever just been like this, like staring at this rock and saying, man, God, why couldn't you have just made me a rock? And then I didn't have to think about problems and hassles and troubles and all that kind of stuff. And I had a cat for a number of years named Emily, and she's temporarily with another family right now. But Emily and I were good. We were good buds, and so she'd be sitting on the couch, kind of just staring. She didn't talk a lot, and I'd say, Emily, you want to trade places with me? I'll be the cat. You be the human. And she'd look at me with those big old buggy eyes, and she'd say, not a chance. You? Me being you? Human? No way. Cats just tolerate humans. But what I'm talking about and what I'd like to share for a few moments is out of John chapter 9, verse 4. Jesus is speaking. John chapter 9, verse 4. And in this very short, just one verse, Jesus shares that he knows who he is, number one. He knows that he has a purpose. He has a mission, number two. And number three, he knows that, there we are. Number three, he knows that time is of the essence. And so let me read this for you. John 9:4, King James Version. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. God has a time and a plan and a purpose and a destiny and a mission and a work for every Christian to do. We're all unique. I have on my bank, you have the thumbprint, that opens it up and stuff. Well, I have this little buggy thing on my thumb. I don't know what it is, like a callus. But nobody else has my thumbprint or the little callus thingy on my thumb. And it's true of everyone. You are totally unique. Your iris, all that kind of stuff. But in the same sense that we're all unique and we all have things that make us unique, in the same way, every Christian has a plan and a purpose, a destiny, a blueprint that God has laid out for you. It is God's timeline. Remember when you were in school and the teacher would put up some kind of a timeline, historic, I slept most of the time in history, but they'd have a, history timeline, in 1600 this happened, in 1700. Well, picture your life as this timeline. And you and I are somewhere on this line, and it's critically, I believe, important that you and I find, number one, who we are. Number two, what is our purpose, our mission? What is our plan? Why did God put us here at this particular time? Why wasn't I born back in the Civil War? Or why wasn't I born back wherever? there's a specificity. That's the right word. There is a reason why God had you born at this particular time, in this season, in this year, in this moment. It's interesting that God has a purpose and a plan for your life and my life. But we're all chained to this thing called time. And I was curious. I looked up how many seconds we had for today, 24 hours. And you know how many seconds you have? You have a total of 86,400 seconds. A little bit of trivia. Next time you're, in the office and you're at the water cooler. 86,400 seconds, and I don't even know how to say this, how many, but for 80 years, if you live for 80 years, it is 252288000, whatever number that is. I have no clue. But we all have a purpose. We have a plan. We have a destiny. God has ordained it. It is our unique purpose. We're all destined. We're going to be going to heaven. That's true. But in that road, that timeline that God has for us, you and I, we are on that line. We are somewhere on there. And as He's placed us on that line, there is a purpose and a plan and a mission and a blueprint, and something that before you were born, He said, I've ordained for you for this purpose. Interesting, just thought of this, that Jeremiah was a young boy. And the opening, I believe, first chapter of Jeremiah, where God's telling Jeremiah, I want you to do all of this stuff. And he goes, hey, I'm just a punk kid, God. And he said, no. I have a plan. I have a purpose. And you see, if you and I can capture the person and know who we are as that person, and then we discover where we fit on that timeline, and as you'll see also, there is a time factor to that, then we can go through life with purpose and certainty, because we know the God that we serve and we know who we are. We have a mission. You see, you and I, we have to find ourselves in the timeline of God's purpose. I'm 67 years old. Dear Lord. There was a time when I used to think, if you were 24 years old, that's really getting old. And then when you reach approximately 30 years old, then you go, 20 wasn't really old. And then the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and you get up to where I am, and I tell my kids, well, listen, I was born sometime after dinosaurs, but before electricity. So they can't figure that out, but I must live and you must live with a understanding of the person that you are, of who you are, and I'll explain how to help capture that. But you have to live in a way that you know who you are, you know why you're here, and you have a mission, and that mission has a conclusion, and it involves the agency of time. Listen to this text again. Jesus said, I must work the works of Him. I must. There was a responsibility laid upon Jesus by the Father, and Jesus accepted that duty, that mission. And He said, I must work, not my works. I must work the works of Him that sent me while it is day. So there was a recognition of his responsibility to his purpose. That's important. He recognized that he had a responsibility to fulfill his call and his destiny that his Father had sent to him. And he said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. See, Jesus found his place in the timeline of God. Before the foundations of the earth were laid, the plan was laid out for Jesus. And he came in the fullness of time. The Bible says that Jesus came in the fullness of time. There is so much in the Bible that involves time. I'm talking about finding your purpose, finding your destiny, finding the plan that God has for you, and then pursuing it and going after it. It's so important. There's so many Christians, so many people, they're wandering through life. They go, what the heck am I doing? Where am I going? Where am I supposed to be? And the other day I was just kind of, John, I want you to know I have my coffee here. But also know that it didn't help very much. I've been up quite late. So the other day I was just kind of meditating, thinking about the Lord, and so I'm starting to get words. Now this is a poem. It has no music to it, but it speaks a lot about the person that I am. It says, speaking about Jesus, before I met you, there was no song, no melody, no heart to sing. As a bird flies free in the sky, to lift its wings, to soar, and let the sun shine down upon my heavy heart. So sad. But then you came. You lifted me up from despair, and now you are the music of my soul. It's critically important that you find out who you are in God. And if it means, getting away from, turning off your cell phone, getting away, get in your car, go out in the woods somewhere, and doing some prayer, some fasting, whatever you need to do to find out the real person you are. There was a famous American, and there was a book that memoirs of the time, and it's called Walden's Pond. It's pretty famous. Most high schoolers read it here. But it's basically, he just kind of jettisoned civilization as he knew it and went out and built its own cabin, and it was under the radar in those days. No electricity, no nothing, because he wanted to get down to the basics. And that's so important in the times that we live. Because it's like everything that can be shaken is being shook. Everything that we counted on, everything we depended on, it's like going into the room and, for years the light's always gone on, and so you flip the switch and the light switch isn't even there. Jesus found his place in the time of God. Someone said of time is what we want the most, but what we use the worst. And there was one of my favorite authors, Tolkien, the guy that wrote the Ring trilogy. He said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And this becomes increasingly important as you gain a few years and a few pounds. Because life is a frail and a fragile thing. This week I had a couple of very sobering situations. I had a very, very close friend. Her name is Grace. And Grace was just the most beautiful, godly woman you can ever imagine, just the sweetest thing. And she was quite elderly. And so in the middle of the night, like maybe 2 days ago now, she passed away. Just bam. One moment she's there, the next moment she was gone. And then the other situation was that there was a younger man, father of 6, and his kids, he grew up. He was a little kid, grew up with my kids when they were real small, and he was in a terrible motorcycle accident and died. In fact, their celebration of his life is today. And so what am I saying? I'm saying that life has to be lived. I mean, I'm all for joking and having fun and all of that, but at the same time, life has to have a soberness to it. It has to have a realization that I have to live, and I have to live out the life and the person that God created me to be. And in addition to that, there is a mission, a purpose, a plan, a destiny, a blueprint for my life, and it has got my name on it. It's unique to me. And I can choose to run after that destiny and apprehend it and own it, or I can choose to waste it. But the knowledge is that when Jesus said in that text again, I want to read it, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for night cometh and no man can work. So in addition to Jesus knowing who he was and that he was on a timeline of God and he had a purpose that God had ordained for him to do, he also knew that there was a limitation. He had 3.5 years to accomplish, trying to help 12 men to get their act together. It's quite a challenge. He said, night comes and no man can work. So there was a pressing upon the heart of Jesus to accomplish his purpose. And I'm reminded of when he was at the Last Supper, when he said, with great anticipation, I'm longed to share this Last Supper meal with you. Because why? It was like everything was on the line. Everything in his life was on the line. God's line, God's time. My mom, when I was young, she had this little white timer, and the back of it had a bell. Maybe some of you ladies have had that. It's a little timer, like a little kitchen timer. And that timer was used for a lot of things. When she'd make eggs, she'd set the timer for three minutes. When I had to have music lessons, piano lessons, she would set the timer for a half hour. And I just, I'm not sure that I did it, but in my mind, I'm thinking that when she wasn't looking, I would move the timer up so I didn't have as long to practice piano. And on Saturdays, sometimes I would get up super early and sneak out of the house so I didn't have to practice. But it was a timer, and it was like something that was set for a specific amount of time, and then when the ding, it was over. So it is with our life. How many minutes? How many seconds? I might have shared this with you. There's a great book out called Tuesdays with Maury. And the story goes that there was this man, a young man, and he was a student, and his professor was named Maury. And so he went through the class, and he was, tremendously helped by it. But time passed, and the professor went on, this man went on with his life, and he finds out years later that Maury is dying, and I forget right now what kind of a disease, but it was serious, and it was terminal. And so he made up his mind that he would spend Tuesdays, the day of Tuesday, with Maury and hang out with him, so that he wanted to glean more from his man's life. And so every Tuesday he would get with him, and so the professor would be teaching him again. And so he would come back in one Tuesday, and his Maury's right arm didn't work anymore. It just stopped. It was a neurological kind of condition. And he'd come in the next week, and maybe part of his leg was immobilized and all this stuff. And so there was a constraint on Maury's life to get out who he was to this man that could be, his life could be replicated. And so it is with us, is that we have to find ourselves, the person that we are, whether it's fasting and prayer and seeking God and turning off the TV and shutting down the cell phone and just going after God and say, God, who am I? Who is this person? Who is John? What is he all about? Number one. Number two, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why did you place me here on your timeline at this particular time? Number three, I have a purpose. I have a mission. I have a plan that God has for me that is unique to me. But fourth, it is a time crunch. I must work the works of him that sent me while it's day, for night comes and no man can work. You have to find where you are on God's timeline. You have to find the person that you are. And that's a good thing. You find the person that you are, it's not easy sitting on a suitcase. It's okay though. It's not easy locating yourself and finding who you are, because that brings revelations and understandings of who you are and what your heart is all about, and motives and biases and judgments and all kinds of things that creep out of our hearts that God has to deal with. But you must find where you are on that timeline. Now it's interesting, Ecclesiastes 3:1-17. I'm not going to read it, but you know the story where it says, to everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under heaven. You know, the birds sing that song, there is a season, turn, turn, turn. Yeah, and a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what's planted, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for peace, a time for war. What is it saying there to me? It's saying we're all locked into the same agency of God, which is time. And what we do with time will determine to what extent we are able to be effective affecting our life and the lives of the people around us. That word time is the word kairo. Well, there's several words for time, but one of them is the word kairo, which means a time or a season, and it speaks of opportunity. It speaks of a short season. It's the original is an Aramaic word. Leviticus 23:4 says, God has appointed seasons of time. You know, everyone, we all use time. I mean, like, how many times a day do you look at see what time it is? You operate where you go, your errands, your grocery shopping, all of this, it's locked into time. But I'm talking about a broader scope. I'm talking about a larger picture. I'm talking about where you, knowing who you are, knowing the God that you are serving, and finding the place along this timeline, like I'm here. Like picture a map, okay, a wall map. You know, the schools had those great big old maps. And you take a pin, and you see your name and you see your location, and you pin it and say, that's where I'm at, that's me. But you can't just leave the pin there, because you have a place that God wants to take you. A guy wrote one time, he said, I have only just a minute. Only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it. Give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute. But eternity is in it. When you have a friend that's a good friend, a close friend that's passed, it gives you pause to remember and to think upon and to muse over the brevity of life. You know, I look at my life and I'm happy and I'm rejoicing in the Lord, and I'm so thankful to find super good friends like the City of Grace folks. What an enriching life I've had because of knowing them so much. But you know, my life at 67, well, my goodness, more of my life has passed than I have ahead of me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to heaven, but I'm gripped. I mean, this is the real John talking, okay? Not that the other John wasn't. I'm gripped with the solemnity of the fact that I am a mortal creature. And that someday, at some time, at some point, my timeline, my place on the timeline will stop. And so that behooves me, that grips my heart, that stirs me to action, that I need to be about my Father's business. You have a plan, you have a purpose, you have a plan, a purpose, a destiny, you have a blueprint, something that is your own, that has your name on it, that's unique, that no one else has. And when the revelation of that grabs hold of you, it will change your life. Jesus cried over Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that kill the prophets. You didn't know, didn't realize, quick drink. You didn't realize how often as a chick gathers her chickens, that I wanted to help you, I wanted to encourage you, I wanted to do all kinds of things in you, but you didn't recognize your place on God's timeline. You didn't recognize you did not recognize your day of visitation. Let me tell you, all this craziness going on, God is, yeah, I know the enemy's at work, but you know, God's got him beat at every turn. And God is using it to wake and shake the church and shake you up and shake me up and say, what are you, whoops, got excited and just knocked the phone over. What are you doing? Where are you going? What are you planning? What, you know, let's be about the Father's business. Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So what is that saying? The same as the text that we read, which is, I must work the works of him that sent me while it's day. He said, I have a plan, a purpose. It's good. It's to prosper you. It's to bless you. It's to give you a hope. Psalms 90:12. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Think about that. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I mean, how sad it would be if at the end of our days we came to the place where we lived in regret. We disappointed that we did not do more or love more or be more forgiving more. It's important. It's important to know who you are, and it's important to recognize that you have a mission, and it's also important to know that that mission at some point will end. Esther is a really interesting story, and in the story of Esther, I won't read it to you, but it's Esther 4:14, and she was faced with a situation that was a do-or-die situation for the nation of Israel. And you know the story, but she determined to go in and plead for her nation, which had a timeline, day, hour, second, where the whole nation of Israel was going to be destroyed. People were going to rise up and kill them. And so it's interesting that I'm thinking that it was her father-in-law, but anyway, it was a relative. And he said this to her about this opportune moment. Opportunity is a window that fast closes. It opens quick, and you have to be aware of it, and you have to be responsive to it, and then it shuts. And so he said to her, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And listen to this carefully. And who knows if perhaps you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So he said, hey, God can bring deliverance in another way. But you have the plan. You have the purpose. God has put the ball in your court. And if you pass the ball or kick it with your foot and knock it out of bounds, God will get the work done with someone else. But the consequences to your life are not good. And so he says, who knows but that you have come to the kingdom at such a time as this. And this is one of the most important points I wanted to bring out. My friends, you and I, you've come to the kingdom at such a time as this. You weren't born back in the 40s. You weren't born in the 70s. Although, I kind of wanted to always be a hippie in the hippie generation, but it didn't happen. You weren't born those times. You were born this time, this hour. And so he said, you have a mission, you have a purpose, you have a destiny. And you have to apprehend it, and not just apprehend it and know what it is, but you have to go after it and own it. I know all kinds of Christians that they know that there is a call, and they know that they have something to do, but it's just like a trophy, from high school when you won a trophy and you sit it on the mantle, and it just, every so often you get out the little brush and you brush off the dust and say, oh, yes, I was called to preach. Yes, I was called to evangelize, or I was called to whatever. And then time passes, and time passes. And then at the end of your life, you go, what? What did I do with my life? What things can I attribute that I made an impact? I tell my kids, I said, I want my shadow to be longer than my life. Peter in Acts, the shadow of his life fell upon the sick and the afflicted, and they were healed. Oh, I want my life and the shadow of my life to affect everyone around me as much as I can. So let me start to bring this to a conclusion. summarizing a little bit. Find out the person that you are. You say, what do I do? How do I do that? Well, you could start by just putting aside all the 15 different kinds of things that we got going on at the same time. And set your heart to seek after God. You know, I have to take a moment and just share how much I'm appreciative of Pastor John and his family. You know, I've stayed with him for 3 times in Africa now, and this suitcase is driving me crazy. I've stayed with him for like 3 times, and, you know, sometimes for like a couple months. So, right in their family pretty much, and so I had a chance to look at him, to look close in at their life and their heart for God and their desire to help Jesus, help the Lord working with people. And this is not, let me tell you honestly, this is not a family who's has 2 cars in the garage, and not at all. And yet, he is so inspiring to me, because here's a man who has gone after God enough to find out the real person he is. And then he's had the revelation that he has a mission and a purpose and a destiny and a blueprint. And it's his. It's his, and it's unique to him. And yeah, he could blow it off and say, "Hey, look, I'm done. I am more than done with." That's why you have to have a calling to be a pastor, to be honest. But he has a calling. He has a purpose, a mission, and he's given himself to that, and he owns it. And day by day and night by night, and fastings often, believe me, and times when for no reason the dang government shuts the power off. 3 days, come on. I mean, even the chickens were getting upset. No, I'm joking. So find out the person that you are. Recognize that you have a purpose and a destiny and a work to be accomplished. Number 3, recognize that time can only be used. It can't be saved. It can't be stored in the fridge. Time just keeps going, and we all have the same kind of thing going. But who we are and what we do is a lot dependent upon decisions that we make. Somebody said one time, sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. I want to take you one last time to one scripture as I close. And it's Exodus 3:3-6. Let me get out the old King James that I've always loved. Okay. Exodus chapter 3 and 3-6. This is the story of Moses and the burning bush. Moses had a father-in-law, Jethro, and Moses had the responsibility of taking Jethro's flock of sheep or goats, sheep I think, up this mountain. It was Mount Horeb, and there was a path there, and he'd probably gone up that path hundreds of times perhaps, and so it was a well-worn path. And if you could work with me here, imagine that path is
is like the path of the Christian life. You have all these Christians, and they're on the path. They're on the path. They're going to heaven. No doubt. It's a well-trod path. Narrow, but it's a path. And all of these little sheepies are going up to heaven on the way. Moses is watching them. But one day, let me read it. Now Moses, 3:1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Now catch this next couple verses. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And notice in particular verse 4. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside, and when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. And moreover he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. I absolutely love this passage of Scripture. So continue to follow with me. Here's the Christian path. Good folks, born again believers going to heaven. But the Lord had a plan for Moses. He had a purpose for him. He had a mission. He had a blueprint. It was all worked out before time began. And so notice that he's doing it just like normal, just normal doing stuff. Here, come on, Betty. I'm here. Sammy, get up there. Get up there on that path there. And anyway, I love all the little animals that I've found in Africa. Man, every morning I would get up to the sounds of the goats, and then the goats would start, I don't know, whatever goats do to make noise. And so they'd wake up the dogs. And let me tell you, there's lots of dogs there. And then, but prior to the goats would be, John Jerusa had a couple of chickens, but they, you know what? Those chickens, I don't know, bless their hearts, I think they've been et already, but they got up so freaking early. I mean, like sometimes, like it seemed like it would be 3 a.m, and they wake up and they feel like they need to wake up the whole dang world. And so I'm thinking, oh no, the roosters, whatever they are, they're crowing, and so, but I love them. So anyway, getting back to Moses and the sheep, that's a picture of the Christian life going up and down the Jacob's ladder on the way to heaven. But notice what had happened is that one day, it was God's time. It was God's time to reveal himself for the first time to Moses. And so he does it in an unusual way. So Moses is, he's walking on this road, and then off to the side. Now catch this. It wasn't on the path. It was not on the path. It was off to the side. This bush is burning, but it's not consumed. What was that? It was a supernatural sign from God. It was a supernatural sign from God that God was getting Moses' attention. Catch me. So it was like God was in the bush, and it was burning, but it didn't get consumed, and it tweaked and it sparked Moses' imagination. And he goes, well, I don't know, maybe that coffee was a little strong for me this morning. And I don't know what I ate last night, but I'm seeing things. I'm seeing a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed. What was that? That was God saying, hey, 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 hey. Supernatural sign, hello, flashing lights. God getting Moses' attention to reveal his purpose and his mission and his plan. He didn't know it. He didn't know what God had for him. He didn't know that later down the road, the same mountain, God was going to give him the 10 Commandments. But the Lord interjected, brought himself and Moses face to face and said, Moses, I have a plan for you. It's my time. It is your time. You're located on this timeline right here. And you have a mission right here. And no one else is going to be doing it. I mean, he tried to get out of it. He said, hey, Aaron, he's a pretty good guy. I don't think Aaron was God's first choice there, though. And so God says, you have a plan, you have a purpose, you have a mission. What are you going to do with it? And so he said, here am I. And so God reveals in detail to Moses what he had purposed for him. So let me summarize this. Jesus said, I must. I've had so many people say, why in the heck would you want to go to Africa when you're 67 years old? Don't you know the bugs they got over there? I mean, now they got locusts and floods. I must go to Africa. I have a mission, I have a call, I have a destiny, I have a purpose. I have no clue, really, all that God wants to do. All I know is He's presented me with the burning bush and said, are you willing to do what I've called you to do? Because there is a time factor. There's a time factor that the night is far spent, the day is at hand. So find out who you are. Go after God. Do some fasting, do some prayer. Get down to the bedrock. Let God just open you up. Let God shine the light on habits and judgments and unforgiveness and things that in the light of eternity don't mean anything at all. Let them go. Let the grudges go. Let the unforgiveness go. Find out who you are. And secondly, get after God so that He can reveal to you, because that's what He said to Moses. He said, Moses, you know what? My people for a long, long, long time have been under bondage. And my plan is that you're going to rescue them. Somebody said one time, if your destiny doesn't scare you, it's too small. If your destiny doesn't scare you, it's too small. I thought about sometime in my natural brain and said, John, what in the heck are you doing? Again, 4 times? But I must work the work of Him that sent me, because I have a mission while there is yet day. Night comes and no man can work. Oh, beloved, take ownership of your destiny. Take ownership of the calling that is upon your life that you know is there, give yourself to it. Study to show yourself approved unto God, workmen that need not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Whatever the calling is, it may not be to overseas evangelism or a missionary or whatever, but whatever the Lord has set in your hand, do it with thy might, do it with your power, do it with your intelligence, do it with your emotion, do it with zeal, do it with the pedal to the metal, and just say, yes, I accept this call. I accept this mission, Lord Jesus. Give me grace. John, only you and I know fully. I want to thank you so much for listening and for letting me share my heart with you. Love you. And I hope this was a blessing to you, a help to you. Sorry, we're working out some of the glitches. It took 4 attempts trying to get this thing together, and it still didn't work out, but that's okay. We'll get it out to you some way. So the Lord bless you and keep you. Let his face shine on you and bring you his peace. Lord bless.